Eva wakes up singing. Eva's a lot of fun. Eva's very social. She really enjoys making everyday activities a lot of fun and celebrating small things.
Nikhil is 17 years old.
He's very calm and quiet.
And always give us joy to the family.
Faith is extremely curious. She has an incredible sense of humor, and she's been obsessed with musicals from a very, very young age. Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, she loves musicals.
Eva has both Down syndrome and autism. And say hi.
Hi.
She's really a resilient kid. She's been through so much, and yet you would never know to look at her.
Nikhil is dual diagnosed. He has Down syndrome, and when he was around 8 years old, he was diagnosed with autism. When we realized that he has autism, it changed everything from day one.
Receiving the diagnosis answered a lot of questions for me, and it sort of made me relieved in the sense that now I understand that there's more going on in this child's brain than mine.
My name is Liv, and I'm a speech-language pathologist at the Down Syndrome Resource Foundation. I have a personal connection with autism, but it wasn't until I started working at DSRF and learning more about autism and Down syndrome that it turned into a huge area of interest for me because there's just not a lot of information on that topic, let alone encouraging information for families. It's estimated that autism is 10 to 25 times more prevalent in the Down syndrome population. Compared to in the typical population, about 1.7% of people meet the criteria for autism. And our folks with Down syndrome, about 16 to 18% of them meet the criteria for autism. So that's about 1 in 6 people with Down syndrome are also autistic.
We never thought that he has anything else. Like, we always saw his challenges like growing up.
Eva was not like the other kids in the play group. She was really aggressive. She had a plan of what she wanted to do and her toy, and if any other child got in the way, she'd become physically aggressive with them, even if they were like an infant.
He has his own way of play, and then so it didn't really work well with other kids.
Faith loved to get into so many things. One of her favorite things was emptying the refrigerator onto the countertop and then calling us to show us what she'd done, right?
Yeah.
She had feats of strength that were beyond her size.
She never wanted to go to sleep. She always wanted to be up and around. And I'd be like, no, please, just go to sleep.
Yeah.
And the bolting, the running away, the running everywhere running all the time. That is sort of what made me decide to start an investigation towards an autism diagnosis as well.
At the age of 6, he started going to Down Syndrome Research Foundation. The staff was noticing that my son has speech delay, and also there was some repetitive behavior, and they suspected that my son might have autism.
Unlike Down syndrome, where you have an objective blood test, in autism, it's diagnosed by a subjective observation of behaviors and different social communication profiles. And even though symptoms occur from birth, it can be harder to diagnose in people with Down syndrome because when development is slower compared to the typical population, these characteristics of autism might show up later, or they might not be as clear until later. I also think people just don't know what characteristics are unique to Down syndrome and which characteristics are consistent with autism, and that can lead to diagnostic overshadowing. Diagnostic overshadowing is when characteristics are attributed to a present diagnosis rather than seeking out potentially an additional one. And why it's a problem is there could be something more going on, but we're not looking past that. We're attributing everything we're seeing to Down syndrome.
So I started to suspect Faith had something more than Down syndrome when we used to go to this infant development program, and they would have play groups, and there would be a variety of children with different disabilities. and there would be a number of individuals with autism there. And I would watch how some of the individuals with autism would cope with certain situations, and I kind of would sit there and go, Faith kind of does that. And wondering, maybe there might be something more.
There are a lot of similarities between Down syndrome and autism. The first thing is general skills and learning style. A lot of folks with Down syndrome and autism are visual learners. They also prefer routine, sameness, and repetition in order to learn. They're very detail-oriented. We also see a lot of specific interests that they're experts in, like remembering everyone's birthday or every NHL hockey player's name. They might have difficulty taking the perspective of someone who is neurotypical, and they might need more time to process information. We also see similarities with communication. They might have a preference for not making eye contact, or they might listen better if they're looking away or to the side, but not directly in someone's eyes. They might not always respond to their name or auditory directions. You could also see limited expressive language or a use of repetitive language in order to communicate, and they're more likely to respond rather than initiate interactions. We also see some similarities with health and regulation. A lot of people with Down syndrome and autism have sensory processing needs. They might make repetitive or different movements in order to remain well regulated. Sometimes this is called stimming, and they might report higher rates of anxiety, sleep disturbances, and feeding challenges.
I think the real tell was when we would go to the play groups.
It just kept niggling away. Watching how she was and how she interacted and how certain things bothered her, I kind of sat back and went, there's more than just Down syndrome going on here.
And it was more challenging because it was sort of hard to figure out which part of this is Down syndrome and which part is autism, and how do they interact.
So even though there are some similarities between Down syndrome and autism, there are some distinct characteristics that we see in autistic learners that we just don't see in a lot of Down syndrome learners. The first area is social communication. This means how they interact with other people. In terms of engagement, they might need alone time or space from others, or they might take more time to warm up to someone. We also see less variety in facial expressions. Parents often report that it's hard to read what they're feeling and thinking, or they have very specific facial expressions in certain situations. We also see a difference in eye gaze. Rather than shifting their attention from one person to an object or what they're playing with, which is what we typically see in Down syndrome in the typical population, their joint attention looks different. They prefer to look at one thing at a time and really focus on that one thing. They also use unconventional or unsymbolic ways to communicate for longer. And what I mean by this is that could look like pulling you towards something or leading you with your hand. They might push you if they don't want something that you're offering. They use more of these gestures for a longer period of time before they learn language.
The biggest struggle is the communication. Okay, my son is asking something, but I don't know what he's asking. And then I can understand what he goes through. Now he thinks that we understand, but we cannot give what he wants. So it's very painful to experience that.
When she was younger, we had found out that she had apraxia of speech, and it's of course still a little bit of a challenge today. However, she was so creative in finding ways to let us know what she needed and what she wanted. And she does that to this day, right?
Yeah.
You let me know. If I don't understand, you tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's frustrating. When people don't understand you. Yeah, I think that's probably a big one, right? And then you having to repeat yourself a lot. Yeah, that's a big frustrating thing for you.
A lot of the time we see that students who are autistic need help in both receptive or understanding language and expressive language. We sometimes see that their expressive language, so the words that they're using to express themselves, is actually higher than their receptive language, which is not typically what we see in Down syndrome. They might also use scripting or process language in chunks rather than individual units. This is sometimes called gestalt language processing, or echolalia. For example, a student might come in my office and I say, "Take off your jacket." And the next time they come in my office or any classroom, they say, "Your jacket," with the same intonation. They're processing language and learning it in chunks rather than individual units. For them, they learn language based on the context rather than the individual words. This is also a sign that someone's autistic. A lot of autistic people prefer cause and effect play, things like ball towers, jack-in-the-box, and buttons that make sound or light up when they push them. They also prefer a lot of sensory play. This could look like spinning or crashing or moving their body in a certain way. These types of play keep their attention longer because they're preferred. They're predictable and it brings them a sense of comfort, as opposed to other types of play that are maybe a little less predictable, like pretend play. Parents often report too that autistic play might focus in on one part of the toy rather than looking at it as a whole. For example, if playing with cars, they might spin the wheels or look at them very closely instead of driving the car or putting it down a ramp. Autistic folks also have differences with their overall learning. They tend to be very connected to objects that they might carry around or be very connected to. When learning to read, we sometimes see hyperlexia, which is a term for having a strong interest in letters and numbers and reading at a higher level than what's expected for your age. We also see differences in overall health and regulation. We see an increased frequency and intensity of things like stimming, hyperactivity, challenging or self-injurious behaviors, sensory processing needs, feeding, and sleep issues. They might have a strong emotional reaction to unforeseen changes, sensory overload, or increased demands.
Some of her greatest struggles are very similar to a lot of individuals with autism. She has a hard time with loud noises, being in an area where there's a lot going on. I can just watch her body language and tell that this is getting to be too much.
Eva continues to struggle with transitions. So transitioning from bed to the table for breakfast or from the table to school, because she does get sort of rigid and stuck in whatever she's doing. It's hard to get her into something else. There was a time when both kids are crying, both are in tantrum because the transition to the car was so bad. And I'd be driving them to school, which is a walkable distance, but not able for us, and see these other families, typical kids, holding hands, walking to school, smiling. And so many times on the way to school, I would cry. I just felt it was unfair, and that these people would have no idea how good that they have it. Disability to hold hands with your kids and walk the 4 blocks to school was something that wasn't possible for us.
Receiving the diagnosis was a relief.
Once I found out that Eva had autism, it made me understand her behaviors, where they were coming from, why they were happening, and what I could do to improve them so that she has a better functioning and better outcome. Not just from transitioning from the table to school, but for her to be able to do academic work in a school setting.
It's important for a family to know that their child is autistic for many different reasons. The first one being, you might better understand your child. You might understand their unique learning profile, what supports help them, why they do certain things, how they learn best, and how they identify. It also informs us about what to look for in the future. There are medical conditions that are associated with autism that we need to rule out or keep on our radar. Things like gastrointestinal issues, epilepsy, feeding, and sensory processing issues.
The government does not give funding for children with Down syndrome to access extended therapies, which they all need. Autism is one way that families can access funding.
With a diagnosis of autism in BC, this means more funding and more support for your child. So this could be more therapy for things like behavior consultants, speech-language pathologists, occupational therapy, and physiotherapy. This might mean access to out-of-school support, things like tutoring, social groups, and sports camps that are made for autistic folks. You might use your funding for things like iPads used for communication or educational purposes, and this often means designation at school that means more support for your child.
When we realized that he has autism, the therapies actually changed significantly.
He improved a lot. He started to talk, and writing, printing. Excellent. Good job, Mini.
It was like a great experience to see your son reading real words. It was like so surprising because like we never heard him asking anything from us. Like now he used those books and the tools to communicate with us.
Cookie. Later, first finish this, then you can eat cookie.
Finding the custom therapies that are unique to what she needs, I feel like we have unlocked Eva's learning ability and we've unlocked her behaviors.
2 letters, 1 sound. Like a choo-choo train.
Choo-choo. Choo-choo.
And with the support of the programs here, it's made a big difference in the way that interventions play out in my 2 children's lives.
We're gonna spell peck.
Peck.
Very good.
Peck.
Awesome. Good job.
And I knew that this would be a very long journey in the dual diagnosis world, but I also knew that we had the DSRF behind us and that we'd be able to find the therapies that she needed.
We have the augmentative device, which has helped quite a bit. She loves to go to the movies, but the movies tend to be very loud. So we have custom-made earplugs as well as she puts headphones on. So we try to keep her enjoying the things that most people enjoy in life with adaptations added to them.
We have a lot of supports in a lot of different places, and I'm very blessed to have them and very grateful. We have therapies at the Down Syndrome Resource Foundation, which we have speech therapy, and we've had occupational therapy, and also some one-to-one reading and math tutoring help. All those supports are essential to Eva's thriving, and Eva is thriving. And that's my job, is to make sure that the funding comes in, that the supports are there, that she's given the tools that she needs to succeed, not just to survive, but to thrive.
I do a lot of front loading with her. That means giving her, this is what's gonna happen next. This might happen, so be prepared for that. We sometimes read social stories so that she knows ahead of time of what's gonna happen and take place and what could happen. I try to surround her with things that she loves. I try to encourage her and praise her and do what I can to help her know that everything that she's doing is not taken for granted and that she's someone pretty awesome.
The best gift you can give to him is show your love as much as possible. So whenever he is frustrated, like I always tell him that I love him, and then that actually changed everything.
Giving her the space to let her go through what it is that she needs to go through has helped her tremendously. And then when I notice that she's in a calmer state, I say to her, would you like a hug now? And she always says yes.
If you suspect that your child might have autism, the first thing to do is consult with one or more people of your health professional team. This could be your pediatrician or your speech-language pathologist. If they share your observations, they will help put in a referral for a formal autism assessment.
If parents who have a child with Down syndrome suspect that the child may also have autism, I would say trust your instincts. Nobody knows your child better than you.
Trust your gut. It's telling you something, and don't doubt it. Don't ever doubt it.
My advice is there'll be new challenges, but these challenges can be overcome. Expand to different therapy programs, and then you will see the improvements like over time.
It is hard. I will say that. I'm not trying to super gloss over it or anything like that. There are moments where it is difficult. And there are moments where I cry myself to sleep at night because I think that I'm not doing a great job. However, she has taught me so much.
Eva has taught me a lot about how to be strong, because yes, this life is hard for me too, but I look at her and I look at how much harder it is for her, and the way she approaches it still with such joy and positivity.
I just love her view on life and her curiosity and wanting to experience things and making me see things differently than just the way I used to think.
Eva has taught me a dedication to resilience and just keeping going.
Nikhil has taught us patience, and that's the biggest strength I got from my son.
She's taught me not to be so uptight about things all the time, right? But I would say absolutely Faith has taught me to live life to its fullest, because I know she does.